Do you have professional game masters in Germany? People who
Very
would run
few.
games for money?
Very few.
Hmm.
I am a professional game master. Game master. I'm not a professional English speaking person. I'm a professional GM actually.
So, hello and welcome to the Polishing RPGs channel, where we do English-speaking podcasts, and it's the start of a new series actually, and it's a series about how tabletop RPGs are played in different cultures. And Germany is the first country we're gonna be looking at. I have a guest. I myself am Maciej from the channel Polishing RPGs, but Polish channel Dobre Rzuty, and with me we have Marie. Am I pronouncing this right?
Oh, it's usually pronounced Mháire, but actually
Marie.
I've heard so many different versions of it now because yeah, it's actually an Irish name, so most German people don't know how to say it either.
Ah,
And hey,
interesting. Okay. So, what do you do?
what I do for a living and for a hobby, both for me is very much tied up with tabletop RPGs. I did start out as someone I just wrote for fun and some small things for tabletop RPGs, and I started doing some videos with reviews with my then friend and now my husband. And yeah, and for some reason that has grown over 13 years into us doing this basically full time. So
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah, and you like run a channel, a YouTube channel. I don't want to butcher the name. It's like Orkenspalter?
that was very
Yeah.
good. And I
Okay.
imagine you've come across that name because you told me that you've played the Arcadia games, the Realms
I
of
did.
Arcadia. Yeah.
Yes, I did play. I played Gothic series, which is like super big in Poland, and then I played Arcania, which is has like mixed opinions, but and I played that one in German. Partly because the game wasn't super interesting by default, so like made it more interesting by playing in German.
I can understand. Yes, it can be a bit dry, the mechanics and the gameplay.
Yeah. So you run an RPG channel, a big one
Yeah.
actually.
Well, in the German speaking part of Europe, I think it's the biggest special interest channel. So there's other people who sometimes dabble in TTRPGs, but we are the biggest channel on YouTube and on Twitch who basically only do TTRPGs. And then sometimes we do a foray into board games and into digital gaming, but that's our focus, TTRPGs.
Okay. I also have to compliment the channel, like as a person who runs a channel myself, your stuff is very professional. Like
Thank
the
you.
way it looks, it's like it shows. So congrats.
Thank you so much.
So the topic is German tabletop RPGs, and I personally like to start chronologically. So, what do you know about the history of German tabletop RPGs? Like, when did it start? When did Germans learn about the hobby?
What Germans did learn about the hobby basically in the 70s, early 80s, because people were importing TTRPGs from abroad. So, of course, people were starting to play Dungeons and Dragons, but there was also some Swedish games that were translated, Tunnels and Trolls.
Okay.
And yeah, so it was starting to kind of seep onto the market. And then there's one thing that I have to mention that's also still around today, Midgard, because usually when people talk about the history of German role playing, they start with The Dark Eye, which is up to today one of the biggest games in Germany. But Midgard is a game that started a few years earlier,
Hmm.
and that came out of a fantasy message board basically, and
Hmm.
yeah, a group of people around that who basically told each other stories about a world, and then this world was kind of codified and turned into a game, and that has I think five editions now, and it's kind of there's like the secret TTRPG.
I see.
It's a small scene, and there's a lot of people who only play Midgard, so it's not very easy to find someone to play it with to kind of try it out, but it's there.
Okay. And is it like is it a German game? Is it German made?
Yes. It,
Ah,
it
okay.
is it is entirely German made, and for quite some long time it was basically two people who did everything in the background. And now they've handed it over to Pegasus, which is one of the biggest publishers in Germany for TTRPGs. And they are working on the 6th edition now. So still there,
Okay.
and probably maybe going to find a bigger audience now.
Okay. Is it like I mean I've heard the name Midgard, I think, but I have no idea what this game is. Is it like similar to something else? Like I mean, I assume it would be similar to Dungeons and Dragons if it was created during that time. Is it?
It is a little bit similar in the way that it is a very general fantasy role playing game. So you have a lot of tropes that were codified around the time, and different species, different monsters. But it's a world that they did entirely on their own, and there's a huge amount of background and of like metafiction and stuff.
Okay.
And I'm not very deep into the lore into Midgard. I've played it a few times, but it's even for me, it's kind of a little bit an arcane secret, this game.
I see. Okay. I've heard a story about Das Schwarze Auge, like the dark eye. So this game comes out in 1984, if I'm not mistaken.
Exactly. Yeah, it comes out late in 1984.
Okay. Yeah, I've heard a story that apparently there was a negotiation ongoing with TSR regarding the publishing of Dungeons and Dragons, and that the game like was created in 3 weeks, just for negotiations. Like, look, if you don't reduce the ties you want to pay for the license for Dungeons and Dragons, we can release our own game. And that's pretty much that's what happened.
That's pretty close to what happened. Yeah, we did dig pretty deep into that. So we did kind of a very nerdy documentary about how the Dark Eye came to be. And basically what happened was that people were negotiating with TSR for the rights for Dungeons and Dragons early in the 80s, because it was a big thing at the time. Thing is, the people who were negotiating with them, they were kind of didn't know what they were negotiating about. And from the side of TSR, they were being like, they really wanted a lot. Let's put it like that.
Okay.
And on the German side, there were 2 groups working together, Schmidt-Spiele, and they were doing the big board games at the time. So, big board games at the time, what was that? That's Monopoly, things like that. Not a lot, but yeah. And the other was Drömer Knaur, and they did books. So they had teamed up, and basically they were thinking about doing a German version of Dungeons and Dragons. And then they said, right, these Americans, they don't know how we do business here. We are going to make our own Dungeons and Dragons, which is legally distinct. And then,
I've heard that was a design principles. Like everything is kind of the same, but different enough. Like all the names of attributes, just the roll you make is D20, but it's more D20s.
It's in the first edition you roll a d20, but you have to roll low, so you have to roll beneath a target number,
like you would do in Dungeons and Dragons. I think in Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, or similar maybe. Dungeons and Dragons has changed so much, I don't remember, but
Dungeons and Dragons from the start you had to roll high, I think.
Maybe maybe.
I've played Labyrinth Lord, which is basically Dungeons and Dragons first edition. I've played AD&D, and all of them were rolling high, but the Dark Eye had to
fair enough. I might have like mixed it up with some like OSR games which have like roll under. Okay, so that makes so D&D is roll high, so the Schwarze Auge has to roll low.
Roll under, and they basically asked the same people who were at then already translating then Dungeons and Dragons for another client who did pay all the fees and everything to TSR, and so they had to both translate Dungeons and Dragons and at the same time write a new game, because then Drömer Knaur and Schmidt-Spiele, they said, we are just going to use our market power, because we can just basically blackmail all the stores in Germany. If they don't want to take the Dark Eye, they can't get our other games either. And that's what they did. So they made this game basically to give TSR the finger, and they pushed it, and they had clips on TV, advertisements.
Yeah, I've heard that. Yeah, impressive. And it worked, right?
It worked, yes.
The game is played to this day.
Yes, not in the numbers as back then.
Oh, isn't? Okay.
Yes, they moved 100,000 boxes and more, I think. back
Okay.
then, and that's not numbers you get in the German market today. With no game does that anymore.
Okay, I see. So I've heard that Dungeons and Dragons has made some strides on the German market, and that it's the main challenger to the Dark Eye, and I've heard it's about half D&D, half the Dark Eye. Is it true, more or less?
It
Or
is, yeah, it is pretty hard to exactly gauge that, because what we can do is, and we've done that, and with other people who run Facebook groups and Discord servers, that they ask people who play TTRPGs on the groups, which do you play? Do you play Dungeons and Dragons? Do you play the Dark Eye? Do you play something else? Do you play several ones and things like that? But of course, there's always a bias, because then if you ask a group
yeah.
that's more for the Dark Eye, more people are going to play the Dark Eye. But it seems like Dungeons and Dragons has caught up to the Dark Eye, and which is something a lot of people, a few years back, 5 years back or something like that, people would have been surprised that that happened. And yeah, that it's actually winning a lot of people over.
Okay. So was D&D actually released back in the day in Germany?
It was, yes.
It was.
Yeah. And another much smaller publishing house, then they got the rights to Dungeons and Dragons, and they released it. And I'm thinking about, I think every, or at least most of the editions of Dungeons and Dragons have been localized in the German market.
Okay. Starting with Advanced Dungeons and Dragons? Or
I,
I would guess the third edition
yeah,
had
yeah.
to be released because it was
Yes,
released. I
it
mean, if
definitely
it was
was.
released
Yeah.
in Poland, it had to be released in Germany, I would guess.
We did have Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, and we did have the third edition. We did have 3.5. We did have a short-lived fourth edition.
Everyone had a short-lived fourth edition, even
I'm afraid
Americans.
so. Yes.
Although, like, short-lived for D&D 4 is still a lot of books. Like, it's
Yeah, but there's not many that came out of the German market, because the publisher pretty soon they realized that there
yeah.
wasn't much demand for them. Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. Do you any other games than D&D and Das Schwarze Auge and Midgard that were played?
There's a lot of other games that are played, but Midgard and Das Schwarze Auge are the big, originally German titles. But two titles that have a long tradition of being played in Germany are Shadowrun and Call of Cthulhu.
Okay.
And they both also have the tradition that both FASA Corporation, who published Shadowrun back in the day, and Chaosium, they were very lenient or very happy for people in other places to write their own material. So there is a
Okay.
lot about Germany in the cyberpunk magical future of Shadowrun. So you have a complete setting. What does Germany look like at the time? And you have a lot of material that's come out for Call of Cthulhu in German.
Okay.
And yeah, those are two of the biggest games. And well, classical normal fantasy games, they had kind of it's a bit hard for them to enter the market, but Pathfinder did have quite a good reputation and quite a lot of players for some time. And yeah, science fiction doesn't seem to be a big thing in German TTRPG
Okay.
circles. All of this is very general. You have lots of like micro groups
Mhm.
and interest groups that play a lot of things all over the place. There's also an independent gaming scene that is pretty strong and thriving, but mostly they import games too. So there are publishers who do mostly that. So you get a lot
Mhm.
of indie stuff that is actually translated and published really well. And what
Okay.
was also big in Germany for really long was Vampire.
Okay. It's because in Poland too we have like an indie scene which is, I don't know, thriving maybe. Like the systems are getting published and people play them. It's
Mm.
not mainstream like by any means. Like it's D&D is like few tiers higher in terms of just
Yeah.
the range, but there are some, like, they're getting more and more popular, the indie games. There's also an OSR movement which like has some pretty big fans. Like do you know about the OSR movement, and do you have
Yeah.
OSR players?
Yeah, one of the biggest OSR games, or OSR-ish games in Germany is DCC, Dutch Core Classics,
Okay.
because we've got one publisher who's specialized in OSR and indie games, System Matters. They're called. They have brought it to the German market, and they found the niche with this. And there's also, you can get Labyrinth Lord and
Okay.
a few other things. So yeah, OSR is a thing in Germany. It was a little bit bigger a few years back. There was kind of tiny bit of hype, maybe, or maybe that's just me because suddenly everyone around
Yeah.
me, all my friends were talking about it.
Yeah. Yeah. I get it. Okay. Which brings me like interesting question pop into my mind. So, what language are games played in Germany? So, for a little bit of context, like
Yeah.
Poland, a lot of RPG players in Poland know English.
Hmm.
So, a lot of games we play in Poland, even though they were not translated to English. But is that the case with Germany as well? Like, how does it look?
It is mixed. So we do have the luxury that a lot of games are being published in German, but usually also with quite a few months later, sometimes years later.
Okay.
So many things, if you can get them in English, people get them in English because most Germans do know basic English as well.
Okay.
And yeah,
But it's not
so
like until it is released in German, we are not touching
no,
that
no, no,
because
no.
why
No,
play in English where we can just like they should be translated into German.
no, most people are happy to work with the English versions. With caveats. So I know a few people whose English is just not good enough for them to enjoy working with the books. And then they say, I
Okay.
know that next year it's going to come out in German. I'm going to wait. But most people are, so that is kind of a little bit, I think, the problem for some products coming into the German market, that people already have them in English. Yes.
Yeah. I feel like that's the biggest issue with the indie scene or just the small scenes because
Yeah.
usually people have to know about the games and because they do like usually they already know them in English, might have bought them, so they're not really willing to buy another copy just because it is in the local language.
Yes.
Yeah.
The publisher that I mentioned, System Matters, which is also a very tiny indie publisher, that's basically two
Okay.
people sharing one job, and then lots of people who freelance around them. And the trick that they found is, yes, they take the indie games, they translate them and they publish them, and often it's games that you can actually play for free, because you can download the English rules for free, but they just make really pretty books. So they often commission new artwork and they take care that they are really, really well translated and very pleasing to work with. And then, because let's face it, indie players, they do it because they are really into this. Yes. And
Yeah.
they,
Mhm.
yeah, they really have also heart for people who love the games too and who put hard work into this. And then people are actually willing to say, okay, I'm going to pay for this game that I already have or that I already can play for free because this book is beautiful and I know the people that I'm paying for, that they do good work and they are very fair with everyone who works with them. So yeah, it's I think it was pretty risky to do that, but it works out.
Okay. Okay. Another thing that comes into my mind is uh, German temperament. That interests me. So, I mean, I've tried to look into some data, but I cannot find like very conclusive like evidence or just straight data. Which is, but as far as you know, Germans are at least okay, they are perceived in the world as being, uh, I mean, relative to the world's average, conscientious, especially like orderly. There is this. There's this saying that you would say in Poland, like "Ordnung muss sein." In Poland, you would say it in German, like it just like
Because it's so German, yes.
yeah, Ordnung muss sein, and that's the prevalent opinion about Germans, like you are orderly. And okay, so what interested me, like I did a survey
Mhm.
for comparing how people like games and compare it to temperament and personality traits. And Pathfinder turned out to be liked by people who are conscientious, which kind of
Yes.
makes sense because it's a game with a lot of numbers where you have to do a lot of calculations and a lot of work. And when I read The Dark Eye, it also seemed like the game that has like a lot of numbers, a lot of crunch. So I asked my friend who we made the review of the game of the Schwarze Auge. And what about Pathfinder? Like, I would expect Pathfinder to be popular in Germany just by temperament alone. And he said, yeah, it's pretty popular. And he mentioned that there are like 4 other main games and that most of them are pretty crunchy. Is it the case?
It Yeah, generally, I think games that very clearly say you have to do this, then you have to do that in this order, not the other way around. And then you go to page 37 and then you use
Okay.
part B and yeah. So the crunchy games, they do have an appeal for the general German RPG scene, yes. But that is a very general thing to say because other games are also loved here. But I'm always joking about it. I was like, Germans are not that orderly, and we're not so strict about being on time and everything. But then I go abroad, and then I realize, actually,
Yeah.
in comparison, we are, and maybe sometimes that is it is a work thing. For work, it is an efficient way to handle things, I guess. But actually, I hate it.
Okay.
Yes, I love it and hate it at the same time. So I can totally feel loving a crunchy game when the system really works well. And when you can really go and manipulate one thing over here and then tick, 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 something over here moves and it's all logical. But I also
Okay.
love just storytelling games. Both.
I see. Yeah. So at games at the German tabletop, like on a average German tabletop RPG thing, which I guess kind of doesn't exist. Like there are no average tables.
Yes.
Everything is like every table is individual. But I would guess like bending the rules is
Frowned upon.
frowned upon. Yeah. Okay.
So if I had to create like the archetypical German role playing table, and they're going to play the Dark Eye probably, and it's going to be important that you know your rules. And it's also okay to then say, let me look that up and to make sure that you did that right. And it's important also to know the background of the world. So what many players love about the German games like Midgard and the Dark Eye is that they have a really deep lore. And it's not like, the Forgotten Realms have a deep lore. No, really
Nice.
unusually unnecessarily deep.
Okay, Dark Eye has this thing with like the history of the world is community created, right? It's like it evolved over editions and just over what community has put into the game. So I guess the history of the game is, for that reason, like somewhat more important than what some American writer just wrote in one evening and like, that's it. Like that's the province, that's the lore.
But that's how the Dark Eye started out, because three people had to bang that out over 3 weeks, basically, 3 months, I think they had. But then pretty soon they started to setting things down. And what they also started very soon was that they asked people, do you want to be a part of this world? We're going to give you a role. You're going to be the Baron of Siepengucken, or you're going to be the Margrave of Tobria, and things like that. And then people, they didn't just play at the table, the role-playing game, they played a game by writing letters to each other as the powerful people of this fantastical continent, Aventuria. And so they decided things about politics and if they wanted to start a war, and things like that. And yes, the Dark Eye has an ongoing history. So since its inception, or just a few years after its inception, they have regularly updated the world to a point where now you can look back at more than 30 years, 37, 38 years now of history that is also in world history, that people are now in power who you might have known as a child in a game when you were a kid. So the game has grown with the people who are playing it, both from the side of the authors working on it professionally and both from the side of the community. So
I see.
Hugely complicated, and it makes it very hard to write for it, but it's also unique.
Okay. Yeah, the only other game I know that did something like this is The Legend of Five Rings. which I think
Yeah,
had history evolve with tournaments or
yeah,
something.
right. The tournament winners of the card game, they
Yeah, I think
can
yeah,
decide what the highlight of the next edition is going to be, something like that, right?
yeah,
Which I
yeah.
thought was
I
fascinating.
don't know the specifics, but as far as I know, like they're the one that were known for this.
Yeah.
Uh,
And yeah, what Shadowrun does it a little bit. So Shadowrun has also a history that's been growing over time because it's always set like 60 years
hmm.
in the future. And there's also input from fans, but mostly fans who then upgrade it to author.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It makes sense.
Yeah.
Speaking of worlds, there's one system and one word I have to ask you about,
Yeah.
which is Warhammer. The reason is, or
Yes.
do you know what the reason is?
I guess the reason is that the old world main setting is very German-ish.
Yes, yes. But of
And
course, it's like what British people think of Germans, kinda. Yeah. It's
yes. And
what do you think
honestly,
with Warhammer?
I love it.
Mm,
Honestly. I love the old world setting. I love the Reich, especially because it's this British look at what they imagine medieval Germany was like, and it's actually in some places it's pretty on point, and in some
okay.
places it's in a lovely way just ridiculous because it is a long-standing tradition and they're keeping it up until today. That if you want it's a German-sounding stupid name for your character, you just open up a dictionary and you find the word that the meaning fits, and then you just throw it in.
I
So,
see. Okay.
so as a German reader, you sometimes go, "They're not serious." So,
Okay, with the names. Okay.
um,
What
yeah.
are other things that are like ridiculous for a German?
Um, it is mostly the names, and then other things that are like probably someone else thinks it's ridiculous, and I go, yeah, that's pretty close. Yeah, that's
Okay. Do you have examples of things that you think like pretty close?
things like if they describe a city, if they describe Bögenhafen, for instance, or Obersreich, and why do I say it like that? Übersreich.
Mm.
That's how you pronounce it. Übersreich and Bögenhafen.
Ah,
Um,
nice.
Yes, that they go on about things like how important guilds are, and or how much they are infighting, and how there is, on the one hand you have the churches, on the other hand you have
Mm.
nobility. Everyone is, it's just a huge mess, a stinking mess of people trying to survive and trying to vie a little bit for power, and that's quite accurate for a late medieval German city.
I
So
see.
yeah.
Okay. Huh. Now I'm thinking about the Gothic games, actually, because there's something. So, if a degree I had, to the degree that I had experienced German fantasy, it seems like there's something German about it. Like I can almost tell that this has German influence, but I'm not. It's so subtle. I'm not super sure what exactly it is that makes a fantasy German. But comparing to Gothic, like it seems that the German fantasy is very much minded about the like factions and just a society with all the structure and all the interests and conflicts, like more so than you would in an American fantasy, which is very much individual focused,
Yeah.
where it's about your hero coming to save a village, and village is pretty much just one character, and it's about you, the hero. And well, like the world of Gothic seems to be pretty realistic, pretty like believable, and it's very much about, I don't know, it's there seems to be a lot of focus put on how everyday life looks to make it realistic, believable, to make the motivations of the characters to be reasonable, actually very pragmatic, often very like down to earth. Yeah, I feel like German fantasy is somewhat down to earth as compared to
Yes.
American fantasy, like specifically, I would guess.
It is. Uh, I often think of it that American fantasy is once it gets a little bit removed from Tolkien.
Yeah.
um, Once it gets actually is actually American fantasy. It's very frontier, very the lone gunslinger hero, even if you're not slinging guns but slinging swords,
Yeah.
and very little consequence. The world is yours style of thinking and of design. And German games, they tend to be more like, here's this world, and this world has to work eternally. So the
Okay.
one thing most people like the rules of Pathfinder, and also in Germany people like the world, but many people look at the Pathfinder world at Golarion and go, does this make sense?
Yeah.
Why is the evil Lich kingdom right next to the French Revolution?
Oh yeah,
Very
yeah.
close
That's
to
like
each other.
the theme park design
The
of
theme park
American
design.
games. Like it's very much like this region is created with this theme in mind and this atmosphere in mind and with these stories in mind. Like,
Yeah.
does it make sense in the world? No. Why would it? It's a product. And
Yes. Yeah. And the internal logic is a little bit more important for German games. And for the Gothic games, as you mentioned them, one thing that is pretty German about them is, and you are not going to believe this, the humor.
okay,
Because it's very in your face stupid in some places. And it is well known and also beloved in the German gaming scene for being in your face and stupid sometimes.
interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, okay, but for sure, like it's not Monty Python. The humor is still like it's still somewhat believable. Like in the world, there's like very little fourth wall breaking. I would say in Gothic
Yeah.
games.
That's true, yeah.
So interesting. Okay,
So
so because like
German
Gothic,
humor is hard to explain.
okay, because like Gothic is very like memeable in Poland. There's a
Mhm.
lot of memes. There's a pretty strong community of people who still like play the game and create memes about it like all the time. And there's a lot of memes, and like they're based on some in-game humor, of course. But I don't think of Gothic. I remember like there's this a lot of like subtle humor. Like nothing is taken too seriously. The world isn't, and especially the main hero. He's like the in D&D terms, he would be like the true neutral
Yeah.
character. And he's kind of removed from everything that happens, whether it's like world saving or whether it's collecting turnips. He stays cynical, stays like somewhat. He throws jokes. He makes fun of everything just a little bit.
A little bit too laid back, not taking, you know,
Yeah, but I wouldn't
it's a
consider.
distance there. Yeah.
Yeah, but you mentioned like stupid, in your face humor, and like I wouldn't interesting. Maybe like this the Polish perspective. I wouldn't consider Gothic humor to be in your face, but for sure, like it's there. Like everything is just a little bit humorous.
Yeah, the in your face, it's more in your face stupid. It's hard to put in words. It's like you play the game, at least in the German version, and you think these people are stupid and this guy is an asshole, and it's very obvious.
Okay, in this way, yeah, okay,
And
yeah,
it is also very memeable in German, and especially one German publisher for the GameStar, which is a magazine about digital games. They once did a spoof with this, which is legendary, and people are still kind of memeing it and throwing it into conversations. And so just things like going, "Lass uns Wildschweine jagen," just sentences from this game.
okay, huh. I have flashbacks of so many because Gothic also received a pretty good, actually amazing dubbing in Poland. I think it's one of the best. I have listened to German dubbing, which is considered like the gold standard. English one, which is hit or miss as far as I know. But I feel like Polish is comparable in terms of quality. So like, and Polish, of course, like Polish people know many lines from the Polish version. But it's, I think that's like Gothic is just a different story entirely. I could do podcasts about Gothic alone, but like reasons why specifically like Polish people like Gothic. Like it's Germans and Polish and kinda Eastern Europe also maybe on third place.
Yeah, but well, Germans do like to play Polish video games, so there seems to be something in common there.
Yeah, like I think there's a in many ways we are like have common ways of thinking. By the way, you have amazing sweets, German. Like whatever sweets come from Germany, it's awesome. Like, and if you get sweets from Great Britain, like approach with caution.
Yeah, I don't know what they're doing over there on the island, but don't let them make chocolate.
Yeah, everything food related from Great Britain is just suspicious.
Well,
But
I have to say, every time I've eaten in Poland, it was so delicious.
Oh,
Honestly, it was always great. Better the
on the
German
behalf
cooking.
of Polish people, I thank you. But yeah, I think we like food. We have like somewhat similar tastes, and yeah, some sort like some parts of fantasy seems to be. I think like Poland setting also should be internally coherent and realistic. More like for sure, more so than in America. But
Mm.
that might be European. I think I'm not sure.
It might be, yes, because I think it's a little bit the same when you look at Italian games.
Yeah,
They are very peculiar about being really about really beautiful and coherent worlds too. At least games I know. Yeah,
yeah.
that's true.
I mean that would make sense, right? Because in Europe we have a thing called history, which Americans not
Yeah,
really. So
well, yeah, we do have the situation that, well, Germany hasn't been around for that long, but many Germanys have been around for quite some
yeah,
time. So yeah, our history doesn't have the turmoil and being a colony that Americans
yeah.
have.
Oh, by the way, the German history. It's
Does
I
have
only
some turbulent breaks, yes, true.
yeah, but only recently have I mean like I don't know, maybe 5-10 years ago, I have realized just the history of Germany. Maybe that's because Poland has always been Poland, more
Yeah,
or less.
and
So even in school, I was taught like there was Germany in the West, but like not really. Historically, Germany as a single state is a pretty recent idea.
yes,
And look at any medieval map and see the Holy Roman Empire with 50 states on the map, just just
it's
the map
ridiculous,
gore.
right? Yeah,
And yeah, so that but then you can like understand more like the I guess the modern day politics of Germany and the inner conflicts and like just the and why Liechtenstein exists, for example, why you have like there's like multiple states that are German speaking and
yeah,
just
because it was just a huge mess, which, well, these small states and all the complex politics, I think it's also something that plays into games like the Dark Eye,
yeah,
because that is the model these games are then based upon. So we have lots of small states and lots of small factions, and I think that's basically in our, well, not in our DNA, but in our meme DNA, basically. And
yeah, that might be.
yeah,
Mhm.
until this day, you have people who belong to this state have kind of a rivalry with the next state over. So that is normal, everyday part of our lives. And I don't know what it's like for you in Poland, because you do have an identity
Hmm.
that was coherent for much longer, although people have tried to destroy it for so often.
We did, yeah, but
Yeah,
this
but you persevered.
yeah, but it's different in Poland, of course, and because Poland, like people were moved a lot, so you have regions of Poland that just were not Polish ever and are Poland for 100 years maybe.
Mm.
So there were like more movement of people, so there's less of this idea I have lived, my family has come from this area for thousands of years, because it probably hasn't, because you were moved during war or this occupation of Poland or this one. So I think like Polish identity works on a higher level. Like there is like Polish, and then there's less local patriotism and less local history in Poland, just
Yeah.
because of that. And Germany has occupied more or less the same space historically, more
With
or less.
Yeah, let's never get into that.
Yeah, and
Yeah, but
I mean, I didn't forget 20th century, right? But even
yeah,
like historically,
it is.
it's
Yeah, in the center of Germany has always been there.
yeah,
That's
yeah. But
um,
then like or like the German states is something different than German, like people who speak German, for example, and people of German heritage or even like Germanic heritage, but that's like half of Europe.
yeah.
So,
Europe is such a weird mixture of everything in the end. But we are kind of what you predicted, that we are losing kind of the thread of what we were actually talking about.
yeah.
But history is important for the game design that
It
people do.
is. I feel like, especially in Europe, like
Mm.
it shows in the games, right? So it's whenever there's a fantasy game, like the history, like you cannot escape history
Yeah,
when you
that's
play
true.
fantasy games. Oh, actually, do you
Yeah.
when maybe let's start with a Polish example. What happened kind of in Poland? So
Mhm.
a lot of Polish people are in, I guess, historical reenactment which in Poland often is called like Bractwo Rycerskie, which is a brotherhood of knights, loosely translated, which is a group of people who there's usually a group of men that dress up in armor and actually do fights, and there's also sometimes people who also do pottery and sewing and all the crafts and just all the medieval things that could be done. And that translates into RPGs because there is a meme of a person like a brotherhood person who would sit on the fantasy game and like, oh, so the bounty hunter puts his helmet on. How does the helmet look like? Oh, this is like 15th century helmet, and based on the setting, this game takes place in like 13th century, so that helmet shouldn't be there. And I mean, that's an extreme example, but like the insistence of like not all of people, but there is a significant insistence to the degree that people have knowledge, and the internet has just made the knowledge more readily available. There's an insistence of that things should be correct. If it's a medieval kind of world, it should be correct. It should be according to what would actually happened in medieval in terms of society, culture, items, and so on and so on and so on. How does it look like in Germany?
It is kind of similar. So we do have medieval markets. They are, usually most of them are not very actually medieval, but some are, and there are lots of people who do reenactment of different times, and I've done reenactment, early medieval reenactment. I did 2nd century Roman reenactment. Well, Gallo-Roman reenactment from the Alps, so a Pannonian reenactment, and I did late antiquity, 4th century reenactment of an early Christian woman, and things like that. So I actually know a few Polish reenactors, because everyone who does late antiquity all over Europe, we know each other.
Okay. So, all 12 of you, right?
Yes, all 12 of us, we know each other. But okay. I think it's maybe 50 to 60 people who do it, and who really do it. And so we've met, and I know my brother, who was also into this, and he was at Polish conventions and digging trenches with Polish people, and trying to understand each other, and he said it was great fun. So I know I've been the reenactor sitting at the table going, ha. And also, I've hated the people who were reenactors sitting at a table going, this is not correct. So I've been of both sides.
I did participate myself with reenactment for a time. So like, I know the feeling.
Yeah, but right now it's been someone who's playing the Dark Eye says, yeah, but that kind of clothes or that kind of dress, or they wouldn't have cut that dress back then. And it was back when? Back in Avaturia?
Okay.
Avaturia has potatoes. Where's your problem? Avaturia has dragons and orcs and goblins. So.
It's funny because you mentioned potatoes first.
Yes, because it is a very mundane thing which still didn't exist in the medieval times in Europe.
But it's funny, like some people would do that. Like in it, some people has criticized the Tolkien, the Peter Jackson movies. They like eat tomatoes or potatoes. And
yes,
in a world where there's like elves and magic and wizards, like, but this is based on medieval Europe, so
yes, let them have the potatoes and their corn. They're also running through cornfields at some time.
Yeah. Although you could argue that. For like, the mundane things are more important for realism, because you can accept there is like a medieval Europe but a dragon, but if you mess up with the structure of history and society too much, it can start to not make sense. Like, I don't know, police existing maybe in medieval times, it's one of the common ones. It's like, if you would really think about it, it wouldn't make sense in a believable medieval setting.
Yeah, but usually we're not playing a medieval setting, we're playing a medieval-ish setting.
Yeah.
And just fantasy that borrows things from there. And I don't think we should be too strict with that.
Yeah, but if I were to play a tabletop RPG session of, let's say, D&D in Germany, and if I said, the rule of cool, so could my armor, like, would the armor of an average hero be just this World of Warcraft crazy decoration of huge shoulder pads, just crazy armor, maybe just a bird chest, something that just looks cool? Or would the default be more or less historically believable, just punning armor, plate, more subdued but more realistic?
So if you're looking at Dungeons and Dragons, it's somewhere in between, because people are playing Dungeons and Dragons, people who now start playing Dungeons and Dragons, lots of them are not coming from like the TTRPG player base, but they're coming from people who are interested in fantasy series. They're interested in anime. They're interested in PC
Mm,
gaming. So they have a different aesthetic design wise, but it is usually more down to earth than than World of Warcraft huge pauldrons for no reason
that's
whatsoever
okay.
designs. Yes, and people do love to have the characters drawn in Germany. That's something that is important for many people, so they get artists and commission them to do that. And you find that most of the designs are quite down to earth, but prettier and maybe a little bit more fancy than
Okay.
would be realistic.
Okay. How's the LARP scene in Germany?
Huge.
Okay.
Yes, many more LARPers than TTRPG players.
Oh, interesting.
By quite a margin, I think.
Oh, that's
Um,
interesting.
and Germany does host two of the biggest games in the world, with Conquest of Mythodea and
Okay.
Drachenfest in the summer.
Okay. How many
Con-
people is it?
Conquest, I think the biggest one they had was up to 8,000 people. So it's
That's a lot of
between,
people.
yeah, it's 7,000 people upwards. And I could maybe ask or look in my notes, but pretty huge. I think there's one bigger game in Canada, but otherwise that's the biggest you can go. And there's people from all over the world going there. So yeah, we do have a big LARPing scene, and we do have lots of people also doing working somehow professionally with LARP, most of them making weapons and making
Mm,
costumes, but also some people who make money organizing LARPs. But those are very few
yeah. Okay.
campaigns.
Huh.
And it is mostly fantasy.
Mm.
And yes, there's also a LARPing scene, but that's a lot smaller. That is based on the Dark Eye, for instance.
Based on what?
On the Dark Eye.
Oh, the dark
Das
eye.
Schwarze Auge.
Oh,
Sorry. Yeah.
interesting. Okay.
Yeah, so I've been
It's
LARPing The Dark Eye, Das Schwarze Auge, for over a decade now.
mm,
Yes. And that is quite fun, because when you have a shared world with so much background, that is really good for LARP, actually, because there's so many things you
mm,
don't have to explain over and over again. And you can just look at someone and look what kind of clothes they wear, and you know what the role is.
I see. Okay. Huh. How much overlap is there in terms of LARP and tabletop RPGs?
That depends on the scene. In the Dark Eye LARPing scene, most of the people who play LARP also play or have played the TTRPG. But
Hmm.
looking at the mainstream LARPing, which sounds stupid, but it is becoming more accepted and more widespread. And many people there haven't played TTRPGs. So there is an overlap, but I think it's smaller than you'd expect.
Hmm. Okay. How about the like outside perspective on tabletop RPGs in Germany? So, like, I mean, people in the hobby know about the hobby, but does the public know about the hobby?
For quite some time, it didn't. And it was really hard to explain to someone what we were doing when we were basically like looking for a place to host a small convention or things like that. So, what do you want to
Okay.
do? What is this exactly? But it has changed, and one of the things that has changed this is that many people who do streaming video and things like that have realized that TTRPGs are actually quite a good way to create content, also very character driven content, and that they can be funny and weird in front of the camera with a system behind it.
Mm,
So, after the last 5 years, and especially the last 3 years, there's been a lot of people who haven't been into TTRPGs before who have started playing them in front of the camera as entertainment. And
okay.
yes, that's that's introduced a lot of people to that. So there's this one group who've mostly been doing PC games journalism, video games journalism, who started that pretty early on, Rocket Beans, and they got many people
We have the
interested.
same thing in Poland. It's so funny.
The same thing?
Yeah,
Yeah.
like people like actually from the same city that I live in. One guy from a channel that did video games has created a tabletop RPG channel where they like play games. It's the
Yeah.
same thing.
Yeah. So the people my age and below, and they know what it is. At least they've heard about it usually. So I'm kind of at this watermark point.
Okay.
And there is a new gamer generation right now, just basically emerging, who are introduced to TTRPGs by watching their favorite streamers online. And so they get this in a context of, these are cool people playing something that
Mm,
is cool. When I was a kid and started playing, it wasn't cool at all to the rest of the world.
yeah. Huh. I have like 3 questions related to this.
Yes.
So like first one, it seems to me I don't have like hard data for it, but it seems that when tabletop RPGs started in Poland, and this was the 90s in Poland,
Mhm.
in the beginning they weren't considered cool by like a majority. So I felt it was like 90% men, more
Mm.
or less. Nowadays it's roughly 70% men, 30% women, more or less. Was it somewhat similar in Germany? How does it look like?
Yes. It was for a long time. It was very similar in Germany. So TTRPGs were something that was very male and very white.
Okay.
And well, I usually joke that I've never been in a group where there was no woman at the table for obvious reasons. Um, and
I had to
yeah,
look for that when I did the survey. Like I had to ask the question in such a way that,
yeah.
uh, yeah, I would find I could estimate the real number of women at the games, and yeah, it
Well,
was like 74% men. Oh, it was like how on average how many women do you have in the games you play, something like this, to just ignore the gender of the person who would answer the survey.
yeah.
But yeah, and women who answer the survey on average had more women at the table.
That's also true.
Who knew?
It is kind of, if you've got one woman at the table, usually more women will join the game, or you will be able to make more women join the game, because
Mm,
it's like the just to put it in perspective, it's like the canary in the coal mine. If
okay.
this one woman is comfortable playing at this table, it's probably okay for you too. And so I mean, not to turn this into quite different kind of discussion or talk, but
Mhm.
I've been part of games that, looking back, were pretty horribly sexist.
Yeah, I get.
um,
It's a different discussion we have. Like we have topics like this
yeah,
in Poland as well, for sure. So
but yeah,
okay.
I'm trying to. I know that in the 90s and early 2000s, it was like 10% women for most of the games, so
Okay,
really low number, and it's been steadily climbing since, I think.
I
And
see.
right
Okay,
now,
so similar.
yeah, we do still have, when we look at the people who watch our videos, we can ask YouTube how many people have clicked male, how many people have clicked
Yeah.
female, how many people have neither. Um, and we see that most people who click our videos are still male. But if you
Hmm.
look at our community, because we have a Patreon where people then can get onto a Discord server that we have for our community, that we see that, yes, it's still majority male, but we do have, I think, like 40% women and non-binary people, and that's among the people who are really active on the server. I'd have to look
Okay,
up the numbers. I think on total the numbers are much lower, but the people who are actually engaged in the community, then the numbers are higher.
I see. With us, it's average because our channel does a lot of like podcasts and just under like
Mhm.
theory of RPGs and so on, and that it's the audience is like 95% male for this. But when it's actually like playing games and telling stories, there's more women. There's a lot more women interesting in the like storytelling aspect and just the playing and listening to sessions. But talking about the theory of RPGs for 2 hours, that's not so much. It's like we can see this divide for sure.
It is. There's a joke. He's a youngish to middle-aged white man. Of course, he's got a podcast.
Of
It is.
course.
It is a very male-dominated scene to podcasting, especially like deep dive podcasts. That's true.
Yeah.
I do
Yeah.
like to listen to podcasts, and I can listen to deep dive podcasts, but well,
Yeah. We
no
have
one's
like
average.
I also then again I for sure know that some women listen to us, for like, even like my friends, but it's like they're like less likely to comment, less likely to get into a discussion. It's but they can listen to it. It's like depending on the topic. So
Mm.
there's like it's interesting. It's depending on the part of the hobby you look at. Speaking of the hobby and like time periods, it's again in Poland we had after 2000, especially I think 2005, our tabletop RPG started to slow down. Just people were playing them less. A lot of publishers stopped doing tabletop RPGs. They either closed or changed what they published. And it has picked up more or less 2017. So 2017, 2018, it started to pick up. I think like probably two reasons mainly. One is streaming sessions. So the hobby, you could actually you could learn about the hobby in some other way than talking to your weird friend and getting invited into his basement and playing some weird game. And the other was I think one of the people who did YouTube, like RPG YouTube in Poland, just kind of blew up, and there was also this. And the publisher Black Monk did create a very successful Kickstarter for Call of Cthulhu 7th edition.
Mhm.
And that was also big. So like 2017, 2018, the hobby got back, and now it's big in Poland again, a new golden age. But for like 10 or 15 years, it was just very, very small. How was it in Germany?
Pretty much the same. And when going to conventions, that was the word I was looking for. Going to conventions during that time, you always saw the same people, and there was hardly ever anyone new coming to one of the conventions, or new people coming into the game. And around the same time, it started to pick up again. And I think because of streaming, yes, and also because different ways of publishing, as you mentioned, kickstarting things, and also self-publishing. And so people had an easier time to publish their own games too, and to kind of get more involved. And I think that helped the scene a lot, because if you ask people sitting at a TTRPG table, would you like to write your own game, or would you like to write your own story, or would you like to write a novel? Most of them are going to say yes, because we're all storytellers. And at that time, it just started getting easier to do exactly that. And I think that kind of invigorated some parts of the gaming scene.
Okay. Do people watch Critical Role in Germany? Is it big?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Yeah, lots of people watch it.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm not among them. I'm no critter, but I do see the appeal. I'm actually, which is weird, I'm not that much into watching actual plays myself.
Okay, but you do actually place on your channel,
Yes.
right?
Yes,
I mean,
I
the side channel, right?
Yeah, and that is one of the reasons, because I can't really enjoy watching actual plays, because for me it's a job thing now, and then I'm starting to that's how they did that, and that's a callback too, and I can't just let go.
I see. Yeah, we started doing actual plays as well, and yeah, but a part of it for us was, I guess, Critical Role, like if they can do it, like playing like D&D, we have like better games and we can play better. Although like if they can do it, I can do it, because my games are great. Like this is the reason why like furry Polish channels exist, like for this exact reason.
There's lots of them too. The thing is, we started doing actual plays before we really knew that Critical Role was around, which sounds weird, but it did happen. And then we did that, and people said, "Oh, you're doing the same thing as Rocket Beans, so you're doing the same thing as Critical Role." We were like, "We do."
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so maybe going to that a little bit naive.
Did it hurt?
No, actually, it didn't. It's
No.
like, okay, then I'm going to look at that. Oh, well, I'm fine being compared to that. And yeah, I do watch them kind of just to look at how people handle this and to learn about it, but not for enjoyment.
Yeah.
But lots of people I know do.
Okay. Do you have professional game masters in Germany? People who would run games for money?
Very few. I am a professional game master. Game master. I'm not a professional English speaking person. I'm a professional GM actually. So people can hire me to run games for them, both privately, although I don't do that a lot. And what people do if they want to have a streaming event or something and they need someone to GM a game for them because they want to play, they don't want to GM themselves, then they can hire me. And that does happen. But mostly it's a little bit frowned upon for some reason because there's this idea that if it's a hobby, you're supposed to do it for free because you're doing it for fun. What's it like in Poland?
Very similar. There's it's complicated. It's not as big. There's very few people who do it, and often if they do it, then they don't really advertise it. I know some people who do it, but they would like take jobs from corporations or companies, and they would run game as like training exercises or just for integration, ice breaking. They would run games, but people who would advertise on the internet like I can run games for money would usually be frowned upon.
Yeah,
part of it is because so many people do it for free that it's just like, why do you think you're better than us? And are your games really that good that you think you deserve money for it? But part of it, I believe, is also you kind of run RPGs for friends. Even if they're not your friends from before, you kind of are gonna make friends as you play. So like the money makes it complicated. Like it's kind of like paying for friendship. So I think that may be the reason why it's weird. Even though like why not? It makes sense, right? It's a service. Like if someone wants a game and they are willing to pay you, like why not?
Yeah, it's pretty much the same. And years back, I was also like, what, taking money for that? As the first people started like talking about it. But nowadays, it's a service. And for instance, I GM for private group, and we don't have the time to prepare a game ourselves. But we do have high paying jobs. That's the reason why we don't have time to prepare a game. But we can pay someone else to prepare a game. We just want to have a fun night every 2 weeks and play D&D or Shadowrun. So we're just going to hire someone.
Do you run like long games being paid?
I do both one shots a lot, and I also offer people, if you want to have a campaign, let's do a campaign and let's play for half a year, and then let's see where we're going from there. So
does it still work with money, or does the money make it awkward after some time with a long game especially?
No, in the beginning a little bit, but at some point it's like, if they pay me, it's probably worth it for them. So I'm not holding a pistol to their head and saying, you want to play RPGs, you have to pay me money. No, they asked, would you be willing to GM for us for money? Well, I said yes, because at the time I was doing it, as you said, for corporations and for streaming. And I was like, yeah, that's part of my job. Okay, let's do it. We don't have to have a camera running. Let's just play a game, and you pay me for preparing it and for running it for you, and basically managing the campaign.
I was thinking that maybe like for one shots, sure, like it sounds reasonable, but for a long campaign, me personally, I would be afraid of like the friendship getting in the way. Actually, like I would get to know the people and start to like the money could maybe become the issue. But I think, funnily enough, the other profession that I think closely like, most similar to this is psychologists.
Yeah, like, probably.
Because it's not like cinema. It's not really like, it is a relationship, right? And psychologists, you pay them as well, even though it's like there is a friendship there.
Yes, so it is a basis for working with a psychologist. So I'm very upfront about this. I do have a few psychological problems that I'm struggling with for years and years and years. So I am in therapy, and feeling cared for and feeling just a bit of friendship is important to work there. And
Yeah,
it's
but
similar,
there's like
yes.
there's a
But
line,
it's
right?
still,
Because
yes, exactly. So we're not
yeah, like I've
getting,
I've been in therapy myself, and yeah, there's like you're friends, but also like this is business, and like I know like
absolutely.
uh, at least in my like practice of psychotherapy, there is the you shouldn't get too attached because in the end it's business. Like you're expected to go back to your like real life, and like yeah, like friends. You shouldn't be expecting your psychologist to be your friend forever because business and money.
Yes, there is to
Uh,
be a distinction, and it is
yeah.
actually similar. We're very friendly people. IGM for, they with me, but we both know this is a job, and that doesn't mean that if we meet on in another setting on a convention or something that we're going to be, oh, I've missed you so much. It's just, hey, it's good to see you, and that's it. Like
Yeah. Okay.
business friendly. I
Now I wonder. Yeah. Now I wonder if maybe this is like easier for an average German because of the orderliness of the temperament. Because I think like the temperament that makes you like desire more order and just cleanliness is the same that helps you separate things in life.
It is a very German thing to have very strict boundaries between groups in your
Mm.
life, and we are much more hesitant to call people friends than most other
Mm.
cultures are, because if you are friends, then in German culture, it's kind of ride or die. So if
Yeah,
you
okay.
are ready to call someone friend, that is as family sometimes, or sometimes for some people more important. And then you have people you just hang out with, and people you are friendly with, and people that you
Hmm.
know that you like. But there's a lot of degrees of separation. So I guess that works quite well.
Okay.
We are
Stereotype.
distant.
Uh, yeah. There is this. Was it a joke about Germans in Poland? So I think the first thing a German would like to know after you come to visit is when will you leave?
Yeah, that's pretty much true.
It's yeah,
Sorry, that's just like we like our privacy. We like to be left alone.
makes sense. Stereotypes about Germans. So do you
Yeah.
meet like in fantasy? Do you meet because there's this common trope like Warhammer is basically this. So like Bretonia is totally not France, and the Empire is totally not Germany, and so on. And like Kislev is nobody knows what Kislev is. It's like totally not all of Eastern Europe into
Yeah,
one faction.
just everything.
Yeah, it has like Cossacks and Hussars and like Russian elements. But do you see like stereotypes of Germans in fantasy other like Warhammer?
Um, I'm thinking about it. There is Eisen
Yeah, in
in
Seventh Sea, right?
Seventh Sea, which is pretty
What?
much, we are very grim.
Yeah.
And
How do you
everything
find
is
the
dark.
stereotype?
Come again?
How do you find the stereotype of the Eisen? Like, do you like see? Is it like is it somewhat true or just
It's a little bit true. The
okay?
morbidity, the grimness, um, is part of some of German culture. But
Grimm brothers were German, right?
yes, they were.
Yeah.
And there is kind of a weird pride that we have the worst
Mm.
bedtime stories in the world.
They're known
So,
in Poland. Yeah, it's like they're known in Poland, and like those are the grim ones. Those are the ones where ears are cut off, where people like suffer for years. Yeah, those are
yes, there's a lot
the
of bloodshed and maiming and death going on. So, yeah, German folklore and fairy tales, they are pretty dark, the traditional ones in Germany. And that is something that you do find also in German games, that the supernatural is often a little bit twisted and dark.
mm.
And the archetypical deep forest, the fear of the deep forest, or that there
Mm.
are weird things in the deep forest, that is very German
That's
too.
interesting as well because like forests are, I think, are like a Germanic thing, and not even
Very,
Germans, but like
yes.
Germanic in general.
Mm.
Like forest also played an important role. That's I guess that's why we have Christmas trees is because of you guys.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're welcome. I don't know.
And yeah, so okay, so is a forest like present? Does it? Do you think it plays like a significant role in German fantasy? The forest.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay.
It is the archetypical outside. It is
Okay.
so
Is
many
it kind of like
places.
entering a magical realm if you enter a
A little bit
forest?
too, yes. And this until today. When people in Germany are like, we just want to go away for a day or a weekend or just this afternoon to kind of recharge, we go into the forest. Lots of people do.
Mm,
And it is a weird boundary. And so many places in Germany have basically been claimed from the forest. So there's so many places here that literally translate to this is a place where we cut down trees. So,
okay.
um,
Mm,
Rot is the word for a clearing. So that's an ending that you find in lots of city
mm.
names and village names and difference too. So there's lots of places that are just this in Boris's clearing and the clearing that we made during Easter, things like that.
Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, being surrounded by forests is a very German thing,
Okay.
also
Makes
in
sense.
fantasy.
Okay. Do you have any interesting like monsters or folk tales that are known in Germany and are pretty cool and maybe appear in tabletop games that you would like to brag about or share?
Oh yes, we do. We do have some really dark and creepy ones. We do have some really weird ones. So things we do have are like lots of small spirit things that you can find some similar in Scandinavia and some similar in the British Isles. Um, the Heinzelmännchen that can be very helpful in your household, but some of them can also
Mm.
be sometimes vicious.
Are the ones like with like white beards and red hats?
Sometimes they are depicted.
Okay.
So most of these. So if you go actually look at the folklore, it's like gnomes and dwarves and
Okay.
Männlein and Männchen. They are very much similar. They
Okay.
can get invisible. They live underground. They come into human houses either to help or to cause mischief. And then there's rules on how to get rid of them. And some of them live in mines and then they knock and either help people or drive them crazy. Then of course there's wolves in the forest that are sometimes
Mm.
weird. Then there's different spirits or incarnations of the devil that offer people deals in the forest usually. So there's one thing from the Black
Mhm.
Forest where the devil offers people riches and everything they desire, and they have to give their heart to the devil or the
Mhm.
glassman, and he exchanges it for a heart of glass. So people get everything they want, but their heart is cold and unfeeling.
Okay.
Then we do have the usual singing maidens in water, the Lorelei. So at the Rhine, there are like
Okay. But they're not
creatures. Yeah.
mermaids.
They're not mermaids; they're river maids, basically. The
Ah.
Lorelei
Okay.
singing to people passing by who then drown in the river. And we do have something that is kind of a mixture of folklore and just stupidity and just doing weird things with taxidermy. That's the Wolpertinger. And there's a
Mhm.
creature that is a hare and a fox and a badger and a bird and a wolf, and then it's just taxidermy together, basically.
Okay, like a weird chimera, right, or something, but
Yeah,
with different animals.
things
Okay.
like that. And we do have some mountain people, giants, basically. Rübezahl is a very
Okay.
well-known giant that haunts some places, and sometimes he's benign, and sometimes he squashes people. And
There was this quote from a Tarantino movie, Django Unchained, which is like
mm,
it's a German legend. Of course, it has a mountain.
yeah, mountains and forests are
Mountains
very
and forests.
important. And if you have mountain forest who is on a mountain, that's like the perfect storm for dark fairy tales. So places like the
Mm,
Black Forest, which is also a mountain range, that's where some of the weirdest stuff is from.
huh. Okay, it fits, I guess, in my mind. I guess for a perfect picture in Germany, like according to what I think of when I think of Germany, is also some towns that have like industry heavy.
that is just parts of Germany, and we do still have rural parts left. But I do remember that one of my professors, when I studied archaeology, said there's no square meter in Germany that hasn't been altered by humans.
Mm,
It's just been so much time since first real settlement, and even before that, in Mesolithic time, people were already planting orchards and things like that to come back to
mm.
over the wanderings. So everything has been changed. There's not a place that hasn't been overturned at some time, they say. So yeah, I thought you would go with there has to be a castle, but you do have really lovely castles yourself. So
But you have like more intact castles. A lot of Polish castles were ruined, and there wasn't money to rebuild them,
mm,
or they were destroyed during wars, or there were like some political issues like bureaucracy, because this department owned the castle and someone wanted to purchase it, but the bureaucracy wouldn't allow it, so it was just fell into ruin over time, and so on and so on. Yeah, but castles, yeah, actually, like now that I think of it, you have some nice castles. That
yeah,
is that
we
is
we,
true.
we do. So,
Yeah, but
but
when I think of like the stereotype of Germany would be like any period of history, Germany would be efficient and like and strong economically. So before like industrial era, it will still be like efficient farming, like rich lands, and just medieval manufacturing. So all the craftsmen and
that
so on. Like,
is that is true for some places. But as we've already talked about, Germany was huge amount of tiny states. So
mm,
there were also until industrialization and during industrialization very poor regions in Germany where
mm-hmm,
people still lived in very terrible circumstances and sometimes not far away from big cities.
mm-hmm,
So in the moors in northern Germany, not far from Bremen, for instance, I think that people lived in the moors and they live very squalid lives. So, and
yeah.
well, talking about running things efficiently, maybe compared to some other places, but still, with so many different states, with so many borders you have to cross, nothing is efficient anymore, which was kind of the
Mm,
reason why people wanted a nation state at some point.
okay, I see. So I think one of like maybe like the last question is, if I play a game
Mm.
of Das Schwarze Auge or D&D, and let's say it's a classic game when there's gonna be a quest and I'm gonna get a quest from someone, who would it be? Like who would be especially like the political leader of the region that could give you a quest? Because yeah, like you have a different history of politics. So I wonder what would the setting look like? A typical German setting on a tabletop game.
The typical, really archetypical setting would be that you might get the quest from a lower ranking noble, so like
Mm-hmm.
a baron or something, and that you
Okay.
actually might play a knight. So knighthood was a very special kind of nobility that was tied to actually being servants to higher nobility in a way, so that you would get basically an order or a quest from someone a little bit up the chain, but not from the top. It's not
No,
like,
okay.
and you are brought before the king, and the king says no. There's lots of middlemen between you and the king, or it
Mm-hmm.
would actually be that you are in a village and just the normal people, or the guilds of a city,
Mm.
and the craftsmen that they would give you the quest. So we do have the archetypical: you are in a tavern, and the owner of the tavern or of the inn, they have a quest for
Mm.
you.
Okay. Like the guilds are interesting. That seems like
Yeah.
these are, but also okay. So if you go like up the chain of nobility, so I guess there's a baron, maybe there's a count.
Mhm.
Do you have like elector prince, or is it the king? Because Germany didn't have kings for a lot of
For
time.
quite some time. So if you look at the Dark Eye, where the main setting on the continent of Aventuria is modeled on the Kaiserreich,
Mm-hmm.
on the Holy Roman Empire, and there you do have people who can cast a vote about what's going to happen with the crown. But they do not have the electorate system as the actual Holy Roman Empire had. So that was too complicated and weird for fantasy.
Yeah, it would require a separate book probably just to explain
Yes.
the elector system.
Basically. But it's a little bit of that in there, but it's not this full-on complicated system of all the elector counts having to agree, and then you end up with 2 emperors in the same year kind of trying to get more votes, and people walking out and saying, I'm getting my own electoral college and stuff like that, yeah. No, actual medieval history of Germany is too complicated to use it for fantasy, I found.
What role would the church play in a typical RPG setting?
Usually, people then keep to you have the earth, the sword of the earth, or the ruler of the real realm. I'm trying to well. He who commands the body and he who commands the spirit. So usually you have kind of you have the church, and they are a separate power. They have a lot of power, but it is not as closely tied. They have to say, yeah, you may wear the crown, because the right to rule usually is derived from some kind of god, or gods in the case of the Dark Eye, for instance. But it is, in that way, very much modeled on medieval Europe.
Okay, but is it like one church, or are there like 2 churches that compete like the Catholics and Protestants would in history? Or is it still like one general church?
There often is different sects and meddling and lots of different churches, yes. So Aventuria, as one of the biggest and most well-known German settings, has one very powerful church that has 12 main gods and then a few lesser gods. So it's not one church, it's at least 12 churches working together under one edict. And then everywhere, when you go a little bit to the east, a little bit to the north, then things change and people fight over it. And yeah, there's backgrounds of religious wars and things like that. So also very much medieval Europe.
Okay. Yeah. So I think it shows, like, it's interesting how history shows during the in games, and sometimes even from people who didn't study history.
Absolutely not. It's just something that you absorb, and you just know that is how the world works without kind of thinking about it, and then it just gets put in a game. Yeah.
Yeah. It might be interesting quests to get to learn about other cultures by like playing their games.
Yeah,
but it
that's
should be
why
also
I
like
love.
yeah.
Oh,
playing with game masters and players from that culture, because like the culture is in the game as well, but like in the things they come up with when they create settings and quests and ideas for stories.
Yeah,
it's that's some powerful hobby we're interested in.
Absolutely, so many different ways to play it, to have fun with it, and I like so many different ways of playing TTRPGs. If people ask me what is it you prefer, I can't say what it is. It's just give me a dorky group of people who just want to slay giant spiders in a dungeon, and I'm just as fine as if we play vampire and it's all intrigue and staying in the dark and fighting your inner monster. And I love both.
Nice, yeah. I think that's a good note to end on. So thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for the interview. It was a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Maciej. Maciej?
Yeah, very good. Yes.
Close enough. Thank you so much for inviting me. It was really lovely.
So thank you to the viewer. I thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. I recommend the channel Orkenspalter.
Yes, exactly.
Orkenspalter TV.
Orkenspalter TV, yeah, TV.
TV, right.
But it helps if you know a little German. Sorry.
So, Dankeschön und auf Wiedersehen.
Auf Wiedersehen.